And this video tutorial is to help you understand some of the ways the problems are done. And let's go ahead and start with the video. The first problem is, if q of x is equal to 3x squared minus 9, find q of 1/4. What they're trying to say is they're asking us to find q of 1/4. That is, they're replacing x with 1/4. So wherever you see an x, you're going to replace it with 1/4. So I have 3x squared, so it becomes 3 times 1/4 squared minus 9. And again, order of operation kicks in, so exponents come first. 1/4 square is 1/4 times 1/4. So 1/4 times 1/4 minus 9. And that would be 1 times 1, 1, and 4 times 4, 16. So 1/16 minus 9. And this would simply be 3/16 minus 9/1. Alright, now we go ahead and find the common denominator of 16 and 1, which is 16. So 3 times, I'm going to make it a common denominator, 16 times 16. 9 times 16 is going to be 144. So I end up with negative 141/16. I can't simplify this further, so this stays the way it is. Now moving on to the next problem. Most of the students get confused whether it's a multiplication or subtraction or addition. You always have to look for the sign in between the parentheses. If there is a sign, you're going to go ahead and perform that operation. If there is no sign, then it's a multiplication. Now let me go ahead and distribute the negative sign. So 6y plus 3, the negative sign gets distributed to every term inside the parentheses. That is very important. What students do is they distribute it only to the first term and forget about the rest, but that's not the case. Even though you have million terms inside this parentheses, that negative term gets carried over to the every millionth term. So negative times negative becomes positive 7y squared. Negative times negative 7y now becomes positive 7y. Negative times positive, negative. Now looking at the problem, I'm going to combine my like terms. I only have 1y squared. So 7y squared. Combining the y terms, 6y and 7y, I end up with a 13y. Now, positive 3 minus 3, I end up with a 0, so I don't have to write it down. And this would be my final answer. Remember, you cannot add 7y squared and 13y because they are unlike terms. They're not like terms. It's like you adding apples and oranges. You can't. So you're going to just leave them like that. That is going to be your final answer. Now the next one, problem 3. So I'm going to rewrite it here so you can see how I added 5x squared plus 5x minus 4. The next one is addition. This is addition sign. So even though I distribute the addition sign, nothing changes. So I'm going to rewrite it. 2x squared plus 9x plus 17. This is a subtraction sign. So when I distribute, the positive 7x now becomes negative 7x squared. Negative times negative now becomes positive. You might have seen that I am writing the like terms one underneath the other. In that way I don't get confused and I simply add them. Positive 5 plus positive 2 is positive 7 minus 7. The whole x squared terms cancel each other. 5 plus 9, I have 14x. And then negative 4 plus 17 plus 15 gives me positive 28. If you write them down this way, you don't have to do it this way, but if you write them down this way, there is a chance you're going to make less mistakes. Moving on to the next one. So let me go ahead and write these down first. They're asking us to find the perimeter of the triangle. The perimeter is simply adding all the sides. So how many sides I have here? Negative 7x squared plus 9x is one side. I'm going to add that to 3x squared plus 8 is another side, plus 3x minus 3 is another side. And again, you might have noticed that I'm writing the terms underneath the like terms so I don't get confused. So negative 7 and 3 gives me negative 4x squared. 9 and 3 gives me 12x, and 8 minus 3 gives me positive 5. So the best way to do it is to write them one underneath the other so you don't confuse or you add them with some other terms. Now multiplying. Students get confused when it comes to multiplication and addition. Remember, when you add the terms, you don't add the powers, you add only the coefficients. But when you multiply the coefficients but add the powers. So what I would like to do is I would like to take my numbers first, negative 4, positive 4, and 5. 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. Negative 16 times 5 is negative 80. I repeat, 4 times negative 4 times 5 is negative 80. Now coming to the x's, I am going to rewrite them so you can see exactly what is happening. So when I rewrite this, I'm done with my numbers. 9 plus 9, 18, plus 5, 23. So x to the power 23rd. So my final answer is going to be negative 80 x to the 23rd. Moving on to the next problem, multiplication. The difference between problem 2 and problem 6 is there is no sign in between. I don't have a sign here, so that's automatically defaulted as a multiplication. Now when coming to multiplication, there's so many ways of doing it. The FOIL is one way of doing it. So you multiply the first, inside, outside, and last. But there's another way of working it out. I would just show you this way. You don't have to do it this way. But this is another way. I'm going to write 4x, the first term, minus 6. See, I did not change anything. And I'm going to write the other term on the top. 2x minus 6. Now I am going to make columns and rows. So the first one is going to be 4x times 2x, which is going to be 8x squared. The next is going to be 4x times negative 6, which is going to be negative 24x. Next is going to be negative 6 times 2x, which is going to be 12x. And negative 6 times negative 6, which is going to be positive 36. Now if I go ahead, this is going to be negative 12, I'm sorry. Now I'm going to go ahead and see if I have any like terms. I see that these two are my like terms. So when I add them, when I rewrite the whole thing, I have x squared minus 12x minus 24x plus 36. And I see that I do have a like term here, x squared minus 36x plus 36. That's your final answer. When you do it this way, you know you're multiplying the right terms with the right terms, and there is a chance you're going to make less mistakes. Problem 7, 4x squared plus 1. Most of the students make a mistake by squaring the first term and then the last term. That's not what it is. 4x squared plus 1 whole squared simply means 4x plus 1 times 4x plus 1. Sorry, 4x squared plus 1 times 4x squared plus 1. And again, I'm going to do the box way. 4x squared plus 1 on the top here. And I'm going to have 4x squared plus 1 here. I'm going to make my columns and my rows. 4 times 4, 16. X squared times x squared, x power 4. 4x squared times 1, 4x squared. 1 times 4x squared, 4x squared. 1 times 1, 1. I rewrite them, 16x power 4 plus 4x squared plus 4x squared plus 1. I see that these two are my like terms. 16x4 plus 8x squared plus 1. And again, I can add x power 4 and x squared terms because they're not like terms. Moving on to problem 8, I'm going to rewrite them the same way. I'm going to have x minus 4, and on the top here I would have x squared minus 3x plus 7. I would make columns. You don't have to do it this way at all. So x times x squared gives me x cubed. X times negative 3x gives me negative 3x squared. X times 7 gives me 7x. Negative 4 times x squared gives me negative 4x squared. Negative 4 times negative 3 gives me positive 12x. Negative 4 times positive 7 gives me negative 28. Now I would go ahead and see if I have any like terms. I'm going to rewrite them. So x cubed minus 3x squared plus 7x minus 4x squared plus 12x minus 28. So when I look at it, I have x squared terms. Negative 3, negative 4 gives me negative 7x squared. 7 and 12 gives me positive 19x minus 28. Now, the next part of the multiplication. You see that in this test you have a lot of multiplications. So there are different ways of multiplying. Now I'm going to show you the FOIL way. 3y minus 9, y plus 4. So 3y times y, 3y squared, 3y times 4 is 12y. Negative 9 times y, negative 9y, negative 9 times 4, negative 36. When I combine the like terms, I get 3y squared plus 3y minus 36. And again, remember what I told you, you can add y squared and y because they're not like terms. Moving on to problem 10, it's a square, and it doesn't mean square the first term and square the second term. It means 3x plus 8 times 3x plus 8. And again, the FOIL way, 3x times 3x, 9x squared, 3x times 8. 3 times 8 is 24x. 8 times 3, 24x. 8 times 8, 64. When I combine them, I have 9x squared plus 24x and 24x are like terms, 48x plus 64. And again, multiplication with problem 11, same thing, 9x minus 4, 9x plus 4. You see that I have the same terms here, 9x, 9x, 4 and 4, except the signs. These are called conjugates. In conjugates, there is a trick. Only in conjugates. You can go ahead and FOIL it out. Let me show that to you first before I show you the trick. 9x times 9x, 81x squared. 9x times 4, 36x. Negative 4 times 9x, negative 36x. Negative 4 times 4, negative 16. What happens is the positive and negative 36 cancel out. I am left with 81x squared minus 16. Now the trick I'm trying to show you in conjugates is, remember conjugates are the same terms with one positive and one negative. What do you do in conjugates is you simply multiply the first times first, which is 81x squared, and last times last, which is negative 16. And either way, anywhere you get the same answer. Moving on to problem 12, I have 8x minus 4y squared, which is 8x minus 4y times 8x minus 4y. Foiling it out, 64x squared is my first term. 8x times negative 4, negative 32, did I put, yeah, negative 32xy. Negative 4y times 8x is negative 32x and y. Negative 4y times negative 4y is positive 16y squared. So you always have to pay attention to what kind of variables you have. If you're having x and y, you have 32xy. Now combining the like terms, I have 64x squared minus 32xy. 32xy is negative 64xy plus 16y squared is your final answer. Problem 13. Divide. When they're asking you to divide, you're going to go ahead and look how many terms you have in the denominator. I have just one term, so I'm going to rewrite it as 12p5 over 3p plus 18p cubed over 3p. Now, I'm going to go ahead and work with each of them separately. Now, with the first term, 3 goes into 12 4 times, right? P5 over P. So when you divide, you subtract the powers. 5 minus 1 is P4. So it's like this. You have 5 P's on the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you have 1 P in the bottom. When you strike them off, you're left with 4 P's, and that is what this is. Now, 3 and 18, I get 6. P3 and P1. So if you don't see a power, the power is automatically 1. So 3 minus 1 is 2. So it's like you have 3 P's on the top and you have 1 P in the bottom. When you cancel out, you're left with 2 P's. Alright, moving on to next division. And again, I'm going to separate them. 9x4 over negative 9x4 minus 6x cubed over negative 9x4. Remember, you have to carry the sign all the way. Plus 7 over negative 9x to the power 4. 9x to the power 4, 9x to the power 4 cancel out, and I have a negative 1. Negative over negative becomes a positive. 6 and 9, I can simplify that to 3 goes into 6 2 times, 3 goes into 9 3 times. 2 over 3. Now with the x's, and I'm going to show it to you right here. I have 3 x's on the top, and I have 4 x's in the bottom. So when I cancel out, you are left with 1 x in the bottom, and that goes right here. Or 3 minus 4 is 1. You should always look at where are the maximum number of x's. If you have more x's on the top, you'll be left out with x's on the top. If you have more x's in the bottom, you'll be left out with x's in the bottom. Positive over negative is negative 7 over 9 x power 4, because I cannot simplify this any further. Moving on to problem 15, divide. They're asking us to divide. This one we have two terms, x and plus 1. So we're going to use the long division. X squared plus 4x plus 3 divided by x plus 1. When I'm doing long division, I always circle my first terms. Now x goes into x squared how many times? X times. What do I do with the x? I multiply x times x, x squared, x times 1, x. What do you do in division? You subtract. So you go ahead and change your sign. This becomes a negative, this becomes a negative. Your first term should always cancel out. If it did not, then you probably made a mistake. 4x minus x is 3x. And what do you do in division? You bring down. And now what is my first term? 3. So I'm going to see how many times x goes into 3x. And that would be positive 3 times. Now I have 3x times x, 3x, 3x times 1, 3. And what do you do in division? Subtract. This becomes a negative, this becomes a negative. Positive 3x, negative 3x cancel each other. Positive 3, negative 3 cancel each other. My remainder is 0. My answer is simply x plus 3. Moving on to the next division problem. 6x squared plus 17x plus 7. I am dividing with 3x plus 4. So first I'm going to circle my first term 3x. 3x goes into 6x squared how many times? You might not able to get the right answer right away. So you're going to take numbers, x's, x's. 3 goes into 6 how many times? 2 times. x1, x2. So x goes into x squared x times. Now you go ahead and multiply that to both of the terms here. You get 6x squared plus 2x times 4x is 8x. Remember, what do you do in division? Subtract. The first term should always get cancelled. 17 minus 8 is 9x. I bring down my 7 and circle my first term here. Now 3x goes into this 9 how many times? Positive 3 times. And then I multiply this 3 with 3x and with 4. So 3 times 3x is 9x. 3 times 4 is 12. Students always forget to multiply with the second term. So if you have two terms here, you should always have two terms. In division I subtract. 9x, 9x cancel. 7 and negative 12 gives me negative 5. So in this case, negative 5 is a remainder. So how do I write it? 2x plus 3 minus 5, which is negative 5, over 3x plus 4. Problem 17. Greatest common factor. So I'm looking for a greatest number that goes into 9, 18, and 30. And the only number that goes into 9, 18, and 30 would be 3. You might think 6. 6 does not go into 9. 6 goes into 18 and 6 goes into 3. But 3 is the only number that goes into 9, 18, and 30. So the greatest common factor here is 3. Or you can simply write down all your factors and as a prime factorization and then pull out your greatest common factor. Now, greatest common factor in x's and y's. This is the most easiest and simplest one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write all my x's here. What is the least power here? From 10, 9, and 1? 1. So that's x. And I'm going to write my y's here. y7, y6, y7, y5. What's the least? y5. So x, y5 is my greatest common factor. So when it comes to variables, you're always going to take the lowest power. Find out factor out the greatest common factor. The difference between problem 18 and problem 19 is problem 18 was not an expression. They were a bunch of terms separated with a comma. This is an expression. So what you should do is you should factor it out and simplify it. So I'm going to start with numbers 18, 12, and negative 4. The only number that I could think of that goes into 18, 12, and 4 is a big 2. And remember what I told you with variables? The lowest power. M7, M5, M3. M3 is the lowest. Now let's go ahead and see how we're going to finish this. 2 goes into 18 how many times? 9 times. Alright? Because 2 times 19 gives me 2 times 9 gives me 18. Now what about this M3? What is 7 minus 3? 4. Now if I add 3 plus 4, I get 7. So here that's 9m4. Now the next one. 12 and 2. So 2 goes into 12 6 times. 5 minus 3, 2. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 3 minus 3 is a 0, so I don't have to put any. Now when you go back and multiply these terms, you should get back your original expression, which you will. Factor by grouping is the next problem. Whenever they say factor by grouping, they're telling you to work with the first 2 and the last 2 separately. So I'm going to work with the first 2. From 5 and 20, what can I factor? 5. From x and x, I can factor a x. I can't factor a y because I don't have a y here. What am I left with? When I take away 5x, I'm left with y in the first term. 5 times 4 is 20, and 1 minus 1 is a 0. Now when you multiply, you should get back to the previous term. From 9 and 36, what can I factor? A positive 9. Why? 9 times what gives me 36? 4. The hint in grouping is these two parentheses should be equal. If they're not, you got to go back and check if you made a mistake. Now y plus 4 is common. I'm done with these two. What am I left with? 5x plus 9. And that brings us to the end of the test. Hope this review was useful. And again, if you have a question on any problem, stop it in that particular problem. Go back and rewind it and see if you can get it, but just do not proceed without understanding, because it's going to be very, very useful when you take a test. Good luck.